My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm 34 years old, and exactly 18 months after my mother told me I wasn't worth investing in, I became the CEO of the company where my brother works as a mid-level manager. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday evening at 6:47 p.m. in my parents' dining room in Portland, Oregon. I had just finished presenting my business plan for a tech startup when my mother set down her wine glass, looked me directly in the eyes, and said, "Rachel, be realistic. Your brother is our investment, not you. We can't afford to waste money on your little hobby projects." Those words hung in the air like a death sentence. My father nodded slowly in agreement. My brother Derek, sitting across from me with that smug expression I'd grown to despise, simply shrugged. I had asked them for $25,000, less than what they'd spent on Derek's third failed business venture that year alone. I closed my laptop slowly, my hands remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "I understand," I said quietly. "Thank you for your time." That night, sitting in a grocery store parking lot at 8:23 p.m., I made a decision that would reshape my entire family dynamic. Before I explain what happened next, let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe if you've ever been the overlooked child in a family that only valued one person's potential. To really understand why that dinner felt like such a profound betrayal, you'd have to go back 7 years to when Derek graduated from business school. I was 27 then, working as a senior analyst at a consulting firm in Seattle, pulling in $95,000 a year. I had put myself through state university with scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans that I was methodically paying off. Nobody in my family contributed a single dollar because, as my father explained when I was 18, Derek needs our support more. He has bigger dreams than you do. Those bigger dreams translated into my parents funding his entire undergraduate experience at a private university that cost $68,000 per year, then covering his MBA for another $140,000. The math was staggering. Over $400,000 invested in Derek's education and ventures, compared to the $0 they'd spent on mine. But what made it painful wasn't just the money. It was the constant narrative that Derek was the golden child destined for greatness, while I was the practical daughter who would be fine on her own. "Rachel doesn't need help," my mother would tell relatives. "She's always been so independent." What she really meant was that I wasn't worth the investment. Derek could fail repeatedly and still receive unconditional support. I could succeed consistently and still receive nothing but expectations to support their retirement dreams. My friend Jennifer saw the dynamic clearly. "They're using you as their backup plan," she told me bluntly one night over wine. "Derek gets to be the star, and you get to be the safety net. They expect you to bankroll their old age while they drain their resources on his failed ventures." She was absolutely right. Derek had launched 4 different businesses by age 30, each one funded generously by our parents, each one collapsing within 18 months. There was the artisanal coffee subscription service that never attracted more than 47 subscribers. The luxury pet accessories e-commerce site that folded after 6 months. The cryptocurrency consulting firm that evaporated when the market crashed. And most recently, a boutique marketing agency that couldn't retain a single client for more than 3 months. Each failure was explained away as gaining valuable experience. Meanwhile, every career milestone I achieved was met with polite acknowledgement and immediate pivots back to discussing Derek's next brilliant idea. The pattern was darkly predictable. The breaking point started building 6 months before that devastating dinner. I had been developing a software platform in my spare time for nearly 2 years. The concept was straightforward but powerful, an AI-driven project management system specifically designed for mid-market companies. I had beta tested it with 3 companies, refined the features, and had letters of intent from 12 companies ready to become paying customers once I launched. All I needed was $25,000 to cover initial infrastructure costs, basic marketing, and legal incorporation. I had already secured a lead developer willing to work for equity, had clear projections, and had interest from 2 small venture firms. It wasn't a hobby project. It was a viable business with real market validation and a clear path to profitability. That Tuesday evening, I arrived at my parents' house with my laptop and foolish hope. Derek was already there, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when I arrived. "I'm excited to show you what I've been working on," I said, setting up at the dining room table. My mother glanced at my presentation title and sighed audibly. "Rachel, is this about that app thing? We're really not in a position to fund another business venture right now." Another business venture. As if I had ever asked them for anything before. "Just give me 15 minutes, I said calmly. I walked them through everything methodically. The market research showing a $4.7 billion addressable market. The testimonials from beta users describing 34% productivity improvements. The revenue projections showing break-even in month 8. The 12 letters of intent from paying customers. Derek interrupted 3 times with dismissive questions designed to undermine my credibility. Each time I answered with data, with specifics, with proof. Each time my parents nodded but seemed to drift further away. When I got to my final slide, funding request, $25,000 for 8% equity, my father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That's an interesting project, Rachel," he said. "But we're really stretched thin. Derek's marketing agency is at a critical juncture, and we've committed to helping him through this rough patch." The rough patch was month 7 of 0 revenue and mounting expenses. That's when my mother delivered the line that would define our relationship forever. "Rachel, be realistic. Your brother is our investment, not you. We can't afford to waste money on your little hobby projects." Something fundamental shifted in that moment. Like a tectonic plate sliding into a new position, permanent and irreversible. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was simply clear about exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of value. "How much have you invested in Derek's businesses over the past 5 years? I asked quietly. My mother frowned. "That's not really relevant. Humor me," I said. My father looked uncomfortable. "We don't keep track like that. Family doesn't operate on spreadsheets." But I had kept track. "Would you believe me if I said it was more than $200,000? Because I've been watching, and I've been counting." The silence was brutal. Derek looked slightly embarrassed. My mother's face hardened. "We're not going to fund your project, Rachel. That's our decision." I nodded slowly, closed my laptop, and stood up. "I understand completely. Thank you for making your position so clear." As I gathered my things, Derek couldn't resist one final dig. "Maybe if you had better business instincts, you wouldn't need to come begging to Mom and Dad." I paused at the door and said something that surprised even me. "You're absolutely right, Derek. I should have better instincts. That's why I'm never making the mistake of expecting anything from this family again." The rage hit during the drive home, hot and clarifying. I wasn't just angry about the rejection. I was furious at myself for still believing, after 34 years of evidence, that my parents would ever see me as anything more than the responsible daughter who didn't need their support. If this sounds familiar, drop a comment below about the moment your family suddenly wanted to reconnect after years of dismissing you. The next morning, I contacted every person I knew in the tech industry. Former colleagues, LinkedIn connections, people I'd met at conferences. I rewrote my pitch to emphasize that I was bootstrapping the company, that I was building this through pure determination and market validation. Within 2 weeks, I had secured $50,000 from 3 angel investors who loved the product and the story. Within a month, I had quit my consulting job and was working on my startup full-time. Within 2 months, I had launched Project Sync publicly and had 23 paying customers. The platform worked beautifully. By month 4, I had 67 customers and had hired 3 full-time employees. By month 6, I was doing $41,000 in monthly recurring revenue and was approached by my first venture capital firm with a serious term sheet. Redpoint Ventures offered $2 million for 15% of the company, valuing Project Sync at $13.3 million just 6 months after launch. I negotiated them up to $2.5 million for 14%. I didn't tell my family any of this. Not the funding, not the customer growth, not the valuation. I simply stopped attending family dinners, citing work pressures. My mother called occasionally, usually when she needed something, advice on her computer, help understanding her phone bill. I was polite but distant. Derek continued his pattern of failure, shutting down his marketing agency and starting yet another venture. My parents, predictably, funded this new dream with another $35,000. 10 months after that devastating dinner, Project Sync had 247 enterprise customers, $620,000 in annual recurring revenue, and a team of 16 people. We were growing at 23% month over month, had achieved profitability, and were being courted by major acquirers. Then Derek's financial advisory firm collapsed spectacularly after only 7 months when a client filed a complaint about unlicensed advisory services. He was forced to shut down and was essentially blacklisted from the financial services industry in Oregon. This time, my parents couldn't simply write him another check. They depleted their savings considerably, and my father was approaching retirement with far less financial security than they'd planned. I heard about the situation through my Aunt Rebecca, my mother's sister. "Your parents have spent themselves poor trying to make Derek successful," she told me bluntly. "Meanwhile, you're the only one who's actually built something sustainable, and they've completely alienated you." "They made their choices," I said simply. "I made mine." The realization came when, exactly 13 months after they'd rejected my pitch, Project Sync was acquired by TechCore Solutions for $84 million. My personal share, after all investors and employee equity was paid out, was $47.6 million. The acquisition was announced in TechCrunch, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. I was profiled as a self-made entrepreneur who'd bootstrapped her way to success, who'd identified a market gap and executed flawlessly. My phone exploded within hours. But the messages I was waiting for came exactly 47 minutes after the TechCrunch article went live. First was my mother. "Saw the news about your company. So proud of you, sweetheart. We always knew you had it in you. Call me when you can." I stared at that message for a long time, remembering her exact words from 13 months earlier. "Your brother is our investment, not you." The revisionist history was breathtaking. 10 minutes later, Derek texted, "Congrats on the exit." "That's incredible." No acknowledgement of his dismissive comments, just casual congratulations. My father called that evening. "Rachel, I wanted to reach out about your news. That's quite an accomplishment." "Thank you," I said, my tone professionally distant. "Your mother and I were wondering if you'd like to come to dinner this Sunday. We'd love to hear about everything." "I'm actually quite busy with the transition," I said. "I'm staying on as president of the division for the next 2 years as part of the deal." "Of course," he said quickly. "But surely you can make time for family? We've missed you at our gatherings." The audacity was almost impressive. 13 months of minimal contact, and now that I was worth nearly $50 million, family connection was important again. I agreed to the dinner, but on my terms. I suggested Canard, an upscale French restaurant in downtown Portland where I now had connections. I specifically chose a public place, neutral territory, somewhere the conversation couldn't escalate into private emotional manipulation. Sunday arrived with Portland's typical gray drizzle. I drove my new Tesla Model S and parked at exactly 6:58 p.m. My parents were already there, dressed more formally than usual. Derek arrived 4 minutes after me, clearly uncomfortable in a button-down shirt, his usual casual style abandoned. The small talk was excruciating. Finally, after our entrees arrived, my mother cleared her throat. "Rachel, we wanted to talk to you about something important. About family, about our relationship, about moving forward together." I set down my fork and waited. We realized that we may have been less supportive than we should have been when you were starting your company. We were focused on Derek's situation, and we didn't fully appreciate what you were building. The apology was so carefully worded, so void of actual accountability, that it was almost impressive. Do you remember what you told me? I asked quietly. When I showed you my business plan? My mother's face tightened. I remember we had a difficult conversation. You told me, and I quote exactly, "Your brother is our investment, not you. We can't afford to waste money on your little hobby projects." The table went silent. Derek stopped chewing. My father's hand froze halfway to his wine glass. "That's not quite how I remember it," my mother said carefully. "Would you like me to play you the recording?" I asked, pulling out my phone. "Because I've been documenting our interactions very carefully." I was bluffing, but they didn't know that. "That seems unnecessary," my father interjected quickly. "We're trying to move past that moment." "A family," I repeated. "That's interesting, because for the past 13 months, you've barely reached out. 3 phone calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 text from Derek. But within an hour of my acquisition announcement, suddenly family is important again." Derek found his voice. "That's not fair. You're the one who stopped coming to family dinners." "Because every dinner was about you, Derek. Your businesses, your challenges, your needs. Do you want to know how much they invested in you over the past 7 years? Rachel, we're not going to sit here and—" my father started. "More than $430,000. I've tracked every loan, every investment, every check they've written. $430,000 invested in businesses that generated exactly $0 in return, while I was told you didn't have $25,000 for a company that's now worth $84 million. The numbers hung in the air, undeniable and brutal. My mother's eyes were glistening. My father's jaw was clenched. Derek had gone pale. "That's not about the money," my mother said, her voice shaking. "That's about believing in family." "You're right," I agreed. "It's not about the money. It's about who you choose to believe in. And you made that choice very clear. Derek was worth the investment. I wasn't. We made mistakes," my father said. "Can't we move forward from here?" I took a sip of my water, considering. "Here's what moving forward looks like. I'll attend major family events, Thanksgiving, Christmas, significant birthdays. I'll be civil, pleasant, appropriate. But I won't be funding anyone's lifestyle or ventures. I won't be the backup plan for retirement. And I absolutely won't pretend that everything is fine between us." "That's it?" my mother asked. "That's it," I confirmed. "You made your assessment of my worth very clear. Now I'm making mine." Derek leaned forward. "So you're just going to hold a grudge forever?" "One comment," I repeated sharply. "One comment that summarized 34 years of being the daughter who didn't need anything while you received unconditional support despite repeated failures." I stood up, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten meal. "This dinner is over." "Rachel, please," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I looked at her extended hand and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just vast emptiness where all those desperate needs for validation used to live. "I already left," I said quietly. 13 months ago. This was just making sure you understood that." I dropped $300 bills on the table and walked out into the Portland rain. This time, I didn't need to pull over. I drove straight home and slept better than I had in years. The real shift came 6 months later when TechCore Solutions offered me a promotion to Executive Vice President of their entire enterprise software division, overseeing a $340 million business unit with 470 employees. The offer came with a salary of $485,000, plus bonus potential that could push total compensation over $850,000 annually. I accepted immediately. The position would be based in Portland, in the same building where Derek had recently been hired as a mid-level project manager in their marketing department. He'd finally abandoned entrepreneurship and taken a corporate job out of financial necessity. His salary was probably around $75,000. The first day I walked into that office as EVP, I wore my favorite navy suit. My new office was corner-positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the Willamette River. Derek's desk was on the fourth floor in an open-plan area with 70 other employees. I didn't seek him out that first day, but word traveled fast, and by the end of my first week, everyone knew that the new EVP was Derek Hayes' sister. Our first interaction came 3 weeks later during an all-hands meeting I'd called for the enterprise division. After the meeting, Derek waited by the door. "Rachel," he said, his voice tight. "Can we talk?" "Of course," I replied. "Schedule something through my assistant." His face flushed. "I meant now. In private." I checked my watch. "I have another meeting in 6 minutes. My assistant can find us time next week." "This is about family, not work," he said, louder than necessary. "Then it's definitely something we should discuss outside of work hours," I said calmly. "Email me and we'll set something up." I walked past him without waiting for a response. The meeting Derek finally secured happened 4 days later at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the building. "This is weird," he said bluntly. "You being my boss, essentially. People keep asking me about you." "I didn't mention it because it's not relevant," I replied. "Your performance will be evaluated on your work, not on our family relationship." "That's exactly what I'm worried about," he admitted. "That you'll judge me more harshly because of our history." I took a sip of my coffee. "Derek, I don't think about you at all. Not in a cruel way, but in a factual way. You're one of 470 employees in my division. That's the extent of my professional interest in you." His jaw clenched. "That's pretty cold." "It's honest," I corrected. "What would you prefer? Special treatment?" "Both would be inappropriate." "And personally?" he asked. "As your brother?" I met his eyes directly. "Personally, I've accepted that we're family by biology but not by choice or connection. I harbor no ill will toward you. I also harbor no particular affection beyond what's appropriate for a distant relative. You made your choices about our relationship over many years. Those choices have consequences." Derek was quiet for a long moment. "I never really understood how much they hurt you. Until I saw you walk out of that restaurant, saw your face when you quoted Mom's words back to her." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think I was the one who didn't see clearly. I was so focused on my own struggles that I never considered what it cost you to be the responsible one who didn't need anything." It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever heard from him. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him, "but it doesn't change the fundamental dynamics. You received hundreds of thousands of dollars in family support and produced nothing of lasting value. I received zero support and built something worth $84 million. Those results speak for themselves. 12 months have passed since that acquisition announcement. I've successfully led the integration of Project Sync technology into TechCore's broader enterprise suite, resulting in a 34% increase in customer retention and $127 million in additional annual recurring revenue. I bought a house in the West Hills with views of Mount Hood. My parents and I have settled into a distant but civil relationship. We exchange texts on holidays, and I attend major family events when my schedule permits. The real victory isn't in the money or the title or the corner office. It's in the absolute clarity I now have about my worth, not as someone's investment or backup plan, but as a person who built something valuable entirely through her own capabilities. My mother was right about one thing. I wasn't their investment. But she was catastrophically wrong about what that meant. Not being their investment freed me to invest in myself without restrictions, without their limiting beliefs, without their assessment of my potential. Have you experienced being the overlooked child who had to prove yourself entirely alone? How did you find the strength to stop seeking validation from family members who would never give it? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about building success on your own terms and learning that sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. My mother called last week. Your father and I were talking about how proud we are of everything you've accomplished. I almost laughed at the revisionist history, but I didn't correct her. I just said, "Thank you, Mom," and moved the conversation towards safer topics. Because here's the truth. Some people will never acknowledge the harm they've caused, never fully understand how their choices shaped your life, never give you the apology you deserve. And once you accept that, once you stop waiting for that moment of vindication, you become truly free. Free to build the life you want, to define success on your own terms, to invest your energy in people who actually value it. The best revenge isn't success, it's indifference. It's building something so fulfilling that their assessment of your worth becomes completely irrelevant to your sense of self. I'm not my mother's investment or my brother's competition or my father's disappointment. I'm simply Rachel Morrison, self-made, self-funded, and finally, blissfully, self-sufficient. And that's worth more than any inheritance or family investment could ever be.